Well, good evening. I feel very privileged and blessed, and I'm thankful for this opportunity to be here with you tonight. I'm very excited for this group as they get to go and experience this in just a few short days. This mission trip to Guatemala, I know it's going to be a great thing. It always is. And, I was telling my church today, if you are willing to show up for God, He's willing to show up for you. And I look forward to hearing all the stories and stuff when they get back. Look forward to hearing their experiences and all the great things they do while they are there. But this evening, I just want to come and not only bring a word of encouragement and maybe just a little bit of inspiration to them as they're getting ready to go this week, but also a challenge to all of us who are staying here and I guess holding down the home fort. Just the challenge to do what God has called us to do and answer the plan that He has for each and every single one of us, whether it be to stay here and do what He's called us to do here or go overseas. And so tonight, if you want to turn with me, I'm going to be in John chapter 4. It'll be probably a pretty familiar story to you, but something I think we can all receive something from tonight, and maybe, like I said, receive that challenge from tonight to try to grow in Christ this evening. So John chapter 4, I'm going to start at verse 1, and I'm going to read down to 23, and then I'll reference a couple other verses this evening as we go, just with a few quick thoughts. So it says this, John chapter 4, starting at verse 1, it says, "When therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee, and he must needs go through Samaria. And then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And now Jacob's well was there, and Jesus therefore being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink, for his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. And then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. And Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? And Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall never thirst again, or shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be a well of water springing up into everlasting life. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. And Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. And the woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that saidst thou truly. And the woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what, and we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship Him. So tonight, really just the thought that I'd like to bring to you is, God, He's able to use us. He wants to use us, but the thing is we have to let Him. God is able to and wants to use us, but the thing is we have to let Him. But so often we allow things to get in the way. We allow things to get in the way. We allow the busyness of life. We allow what the world thinks. We allow the devil to get to us a little bit and sometimes knock us off the plan that God has for us. But tonight, I want just to issue the challenge to you, to answer that calling that God has on your life, whether it be to go across big waters, or whether it be right here at home. And, because there's a calling for both. And so looking at this story tonight, like I said, it's probably something that is familiar to you, a story that you've heard before. But here we see that Jesus, he is leaving Judea and he's heading to Galilee. And so something you have to understand right here that's a big part of this story is that to get from Judea to Galilee, directly in between these two places is Samaria. Okay, so the quickest place to get from point A to point B is a straight line. But guess what? That's not what the Jews did. The Jews at this time hated Samaritans so much, wanted nothing to do with Samaritans so much, that they would either cross the Jordan River twice, go through Perea, and circle all the way around to get there, or they would go up the side where the ocean or the sea was and go up the edge of the sea just to skip all the way around Samaria, because they wanted nothing to do with Samaritans, as we see the woman at the well point out just a little bit later. And that was because Samaritans were, you would consider them kind of a mix. They were half Jew, and they were people who had went and married or had dealings with people who were not Jews. And so to the Jews, that was a big issue, and they wanted nothing to do with them. They were just outcast, and they had no dealings. Jews had no dealings with Samaritans, so much that they didn't even want to step foot where they lived at. But for some reason, and of course we know that Jesus knew why, but probably the disciples didn't. The disciples knew that Jesus had to get to Galilee, but he tells them that I must needs go through Samaria. I've got to go. I have a reason to go. There is something that I must do, which would have been odd for the disciples. They'd have been like, well, that's not what Jesus is supposed to be doing. Society would say that's wrong for Jesus to be doing that. But Jesus had something that he had to do. And so he goes and he sends his disciples on into town to find water and food. And while he was sitting there at the well, a woman comes to draw water, but she comes at the hottest part of the day. It says she comes at the 6th hour. And so it was up into the middle of the day, the hottest part of the day. And a Samaritan comes to talk to Jesus. He says, well, you're coming to draw water. Will you give me something to drink? I have nothing to drink. And immediately she notices that Jesus was a Jew. Not only was he was a Jew, but he was a man. And so there's automatically some differences that we see between these two people. And she starts bringing up the issues of why Jesus shouldn't be talking to her and wondering why he's doing what he's doing. And immediately Jesus does what he does best and starts talking to her, telling her everything about her, telling her everything that he has to offer her without directly coming out and saying it. And finally, we see that she says, well, if you've got this water that would make me never thirst again and never have to come here and draw again, well, let me have it. I need that. And the reason for that was because she, as we see a little bit later, had already had 5 husbands and was now living with the man that wasn't her husband. And so you could say that she was herself in her own town probably a pretty big outcast. Probably somebody who got talked about quite a bit, gossiped about, side-eyed a little bit, got some bad looks. And so you can imagine that the going to draw water at the well at the same time that all the other women were there probably wasn't something that was too good of a time for her. Probably something she didn't enjoy too much because she was probably the main topic of conversation. And so she went when nobody else was there. Even though it was hot, it was hard, she would rather go and experience that than have to experience people talking bad about her and side-eyeing her, looking at her differently because of the mistake she had made. But finally, Jesus gets the point to her and he starts telling her everything about her life, shows that he knows who she is without her even telling him. And she says, well, I can kind of tell you must be a prophet if you know these things. But if you look on down in verses 24 through 26, it says this. It says, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. And the woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. And Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. I am the Messiah. And so, that was just a quick kind of what was going on in this story, but there are just a couple of things that I'd like to point out this evening, just to point and just kind of give this challenge to you and express this challenge to you this evening of, God wanting to use us, and He is able to use us, but we have to let Him and keep things from getting in the way. And the first thing that I want you to notice in this story was that Jesus, right off the bat, did exactly that. Right off the bat, Jesus did everything that He knew He had to do to allow God to use Him. Because, even from a very young age, we know Jesus was here. He says, I'm about my Father's business. I'm here to do my Father's business. And so, something that's very easy for us today in the world we live in is to allow society to get in the way. Is to allow society to get in the way. Because if any other Jew had have seen Jesus about to step foot in Samaria, they'd have been like, what are you doing? Why are you about to do this? You know you're not supposed to do this. You know that our people don't associate with those people. You know that's against society standards. You know the world tells you not to do that. They're not worth it. They're not worth your time. They're different from us. You're not supposed to be doing that. People, what are people going to say about you if you go do something like that? If you go step in Samaria? Why are you wasting your time on them? They're different from us. They look different than us. They're not our people. They're blemished. They're dirty. They're nasty. They're not valuable. There's some people that society would say that about today. Why are you wasting your time flying across a big ocean? Flying to a whole different country? Why are you wasting your time going and dealing with people that look different than us? Why are you wasting your time, if we do it a little closer to home, why are you out there talking to people that don't make as much money as you do? Why are you out there talking to people who drive a different vehicle than you do, that's not as nice, that dress differently than you, that look differently than you, they've got a different color skin than you do, that maybe think a little differently than you do? It's things that the world might say. But the reason is, and our answer should be, is because Jesus would. Because Jesus would. Because Jesus had that urgency about Him. You see, He didn't care what the world thought. All He knew was that He must needs go. Because my Father has called me to do this, this is what I must do. Because this is the calling that my Father put on me, this is what I must do. Because my Jesus gave everything for me, this is what I have to do. No matter how scary it may be, no matter how society may tell us that's not what we should be doing, that's not what society would do, that's not what the world calls us to do, because Jesus would, that's why we should. That's why we should. No matter whether it's at home or no matter whether it's across countries, across oceans, if Jesus is calling us to do something, we need to go and do it. And I'm thankful for this group that's doing just that this week. Are we doing it at home? The next thing that I think sometimes allows us to get in the way of allowing God to use us is I think so often the devil likes to show us how different than Jesus we are when it's just us. How different we are than Jesus when it's just us. He likes to point out those flaws. He likes to point out those mistakes, those failures, those times where we don't get it wrong, those differences, those days where we just aren't what Jesus called us to be because the human in us, we allow it to get in the way sometimes. And that's what we see in this story. You see, automatically when Jesus shows up to this woman, she immediately likes to start pointing out the differences. First thing, right off the bat, He comes to her, 100% man, 100% God, a Jew, perfect. Comes to her, never made a mistake, never messed up, not a sin to His name. And He comes and meets a woman who was not only just a woman, she was a Samaritan woman, and she was a woman whose life at some point it just got turned upside down. That was far from perfect. That was blemished. That was flawed. But Jesus didn't care. You see, at this time, like I said, Jews were not supposed to have anything to do with Samaritans. But not only that, a man was not supposed to talk to a woman without her husband or the man that she was with present. So immediately, like I said, Jesus, he's breaking all types of society standards. He didn't care. It's what his father told him to do. So that's what he was doing. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and break the law. I'm not telling you that. Don't do that. But I don't think God calls us to break the law. At least the laws that, there are some, I will say there are some Christians who are breaking certain countries' laws, putting their life in danger. I will say that. But here in the United States, we have freedoms that a lot of people don't. And I think that if God is calling us to do something, we should answer that call. But you see, immediately, the devil, he wanted to put all of those differences in that woman's mind. He wanted to show her all the reasons that this wouldn't work, that it didn't make sense. And so often I think we know that Jesus is putting a calling on our life. He's challenging us to do something. There may be some people in here that felt called to go on this trip, but for whatever reason or not, we were like, no, just not this year. Not this time. It's maybe next year. Maybe things will be right. Maybe things will be perfect next year, and I'll do it. That may be the case. There may be something today or tonight that Jesus is calling you to do, and you know for a fact He's telling you to do that, but for whatever reason, you're allowing something to get in the way. Don't let that be the case. Don't let the devil put those differences in your mind. He likes to knock us off of our game. He likes to show us all the ways that maybe we think we can't, that we think that we're not good enough. But the thing is we're not called to be good enough. If it was up to that woman to be good enough, she never would have been. If it had been up to that woman to find Jesus, guess what? She probably never would have. But we serve a Jesus who comes looking for us. We serve a Jesus that comes looking for us. Just like He came and He had an appointed meeting with her even though she had no idea about it. She had no idea how drastically her life was about to change. And so the thing is that we just have to be willing. We don't have to, we don't have to make ourselves perfect. We don't have to clean ourselves up. That song, we sang it this morning, just as I am. That's how He wants us. That's how He wants to send us. He doesn't want us to equip ourselves. He just wants us to be willing so that He can equip us. That's all that He asks from us, just to make ourselves available, to step out for Him, to show up for Him, and He's faithful to show up for us. Well, the last thing that I think, and the last thing I want to point out this evening, but something that I think that the devil is good at and tries to keep us from living our lives for God, even though he wants to and is able to use us. The devil, he's good with coming up with excuses. He's good with coming up with excuses and giving us all of the ways, all the outcomes that it may not work. He's good at that. We see that Jesus, he asked this woman for a drink, and he starts bringing up the idea of this living water. And like I said, she says, you're a Jew, you're a man, I'm a Samaritan, I'm a woman, this should not be happening. But even there, and she goes even further in verse 11, and she says, the woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and this well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? She starts bringing up all the reasons why it shouldn't work. You've got nothing to draw with. How are you going to give me some living water? This well is deep. How are you going to get a hold of this living water? Well, friends, so often in life we'll come to a certain time and it seems like the well that we're trying to draw, man, it's deep. For one reason or another, we just can't make it happen. Sometimes we'll come to something and we'll feel God calling us to do it, and we feel so ill-equipped, we feel like we ain't even got anything to draw with at all. We feel like we have no answer. We have no response. We don't know what to do. We don't know what the answer is. We've got so many questions. We don't know what to do. But the thing is Jesus, He doesn't call us to do it just by ourselves. He doesn't call us to do it by ourselves. You see, this woman, she was so caught up. She was so caught up with what was right in front of her. And I love how the thing that Jesus brought to her and was comparing and contrasting to her with this story was something that she struggled with each and every day. The thing that was her problem, the thing that she struggled with, the thing that she worried about. You know, she probably woke up each and every day stressing about having to go to that well. Every single day she was worried about it, but it was something she had to do. If she was going to feed animals, if she was going to have water to cook with, have water to clean with, have water to drink, guess what? She had to go to the well. It was something she had to do, but every day she woke up anxious about it. I've got to do it again. What if I run into somebody who's going to make fun of me? What if I catch people staring at me? What if I go and there's somebody already there? Do I need to turn around and go back home and wait till later? Can I go and just run and hurry up and get it done real quick and then make it back home, hopefully without anybody seeing me? Think of how many excuses she came up with to not go. Well, maybe I should wait just 30 more minutes. Well, if I go at the hottest part of the day, no one else should be there, so I won't run into anybody. Something she had to do. Well, my friends, when we take on the name Christian, living for Jesus and doing what He's called us to do, that's something we should feel that we have to do. But how often in daily life do we let those excuses roll in? Well, you know, I just woke up today on the wrong side of the bed. I'll talk to him about Jesus tomorrow. I've got a busy day, a day full of work today. I just don't have time. I know Jesus wanted me to tell my testimony to that person. I know that He wanted me to go and tell them how to be saved. I know that He wanted me just to tell somebody that Jesus loves them. But, you know, they might think I'm weird. They might think that's a little off. No, I don't want to do that. That's just not for me. Or he may be trying to say, you know, you need to go to Guatemala, but, you know, I'm busy at work. I'm behind. Not this year. You know, we've got so many family issues going on. What if I get over there? You know, I'm scared of airplanes. What if I get over there and the food doesn't sit well with me? What if I can't handle all the tasks that are asked of me? If He's telling you to go, He'll make a way. Don't make an excuse. If He's telling you to do something, He'll make a way. Don't make an excuse. The devil's faithful to give them. He's faithful to give them. He's got one lined up for every situation. Every outcome, every opportunity, He's got an excuse, let me tell you. And He'll give it to you as many times as He can. He'll show you why you're not good enough. He'll tell you why it ain't going to work, why you're going to fail. But we've got a Jesus that never fails. We've got a Jesus that can always make it work. We got a Jesus who knows how it's going to turn out before we even start. So what are we worried about? If He's calling you to do it, answer that call. And the last thing I want to leave you with this evening, before we move on with our service, I want you to realize tonight that if you're still kicking, if you're in here and you're still breathing, and I hope everybody in here is, Jesus can use you. No matter how many times you've messed up, no matter how many times you've got it wrong, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, no matter what, if you're male or female, no matter whatever it may be, whatever you could come up with, Jesus can use you. You see, because we see in this story, we see a woman to her town was probably not worth much. They would say she's good for nothing, she's dirty, she's nasty, she's invaluable. But to Jesus, she was a soul. She was somebody that He was headed to the cross to die for. And to Him, she was worth loving. She was worth His time. And so guess what? People should be just that to us. They're a soul that Jesus was worth dying for, so they should be worth our time. They should be worth us talking to them. They should be worth us loving them. Because Jesus loved them. He gave everything for them. But so often we can't give 5 minutes to them. We can't give the time of day to them. To her town, she was nasty, dirty, a nobody, unworthy. If Jesus walked into that town after everybody got over the shock of seeing a Jew in their town, and he asked them and said, who here will be best for me to use to point people to my God, she would have been at the bottom of the list. The very bottom. But not to Jesus. And we see, if you look on down, and if you want to read with me, I'll read it to you just really quick. I want to read verse 28 to you. It says, the woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and saith to the men, come see a man which told me all the things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? And then they went out of the city and came unto him. And in the meantime, while his disciples prayed him, saying, Master, eat. But he said unto them, I have meat to eat that ye know not of. This woman, she left the thing that she struggled with Jesus. That water pot, that was the bane of her existence. The thing that she struggled with each and every day. But when she met with Jesus, she left those excuses there. She left those differences there. And she went and told everybody what Jesus did for her. And because she was willing, you see, I love this because we see a woman walking to a well, carrying a water pot, not wanting to see anybody. Not wanting to talk to anybody, not wanting to run into anybody. But she leaves the well, leaves the water pot, and runs away wanting to talk to as many people as she can. That's the difference that Jesus made in the life of somebody to her own people was a nobody. And they did nothing but talk bad about her, but she didn't care anymore because of what Jesus had done for her. She had to tell somebody. And because she was willing to do that, if you look down at verse 39, it says this, it says, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed on him for the saying of the woman which testified, he told me all that I ever did. And so when the Samaritans were coming to him, they besought him that he would tarry with them. And he abode there 2 more days, and many more believed because of his own word. And said unto the woman, now we believe, not because of thy saying, for we have heard him ourselves, and know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. If that woman hadn't have been at that well, Jesus would have walked on by, and those people would have had no idea what they've missed. But because of somebody who is considered a nobody, dirty, nasty, invaluable, unworthy, a ton of people in her city came to know Jesus. You see, friends, we never know what could happen when we step out on a little bit of faith. We never know the chain reaction that could happen. You see, I know that Jesus, he knew what was going to happen. He knew that when that woman, when he got to talk to her and tell her and minister to her, he knew that she was going to accept the plan of salvation he had for her, and he knew that she was going to run to that city. But guess what? I firmly believe that if she was the only one that came to know him, he still would have went. If it had just been one, he still would have went. You know, I tell my church all the time, I firmly believe that Jesus thought about each and every single one of us while we were on the cross by name. I firmly believe that. And I firmly believe that if he knew that you were the only one that was going to accept that gift that he had for you, he still would have went. If you were the only one, he still would have went. Because he loves you just that much. He would have gave his life just for you. But there's a lot of people out there today that he gave his life for. Are we pointing people to him? Or are we letting differences get in the way? Are we answering the call that he has for us? Or are we answering what society has called us to do? Are we following the plan that he has for our life? Or are we good with listening to those excuses? You never know the impact you could have when you answer and step out on faith in Jesus. Whole town might get saved. Whole country might get saved. But who cares if it's just one? Bible says the angels rejoice in heaven when just one comes to know Jesus. Are we allowing God to use us? He wants to and He's able to. Will we let Him? Brother Devin, come ahead.